Teachers, what's the most intricate attempt a student ever made to frame you? Full story. One moment, I was just eating my turkey sandwich, completely oblivious. The next, my entire life shattered into 1,000 pieces. An email, 4 chilling words, and the threat of a lawsuit that wasn't just about money, but about stripping away everything I'd ever built. Everything I was. That email arrived like a punch to the gut. Urgent. My office now. No context, no explanation, just those all-caps words followed by parents threatening lawsuit. My heart didn't just beat. It throbbed, a frantic drum against my ribs. I'd been teaching for 6 years, never even a parking ticket, let alone a legal threat. I literally abandoned my lunch, still half-eaten, and speed-walked through the hallways, my mind racing. What could it be? Did a kid get hurt in my class? Did I mistakenly fail someone? The lawsuit and that word echoed in my head, a death knell for my teaching license, my career, my future. Everything I'd worked for since college could just vanish. I reached the main office, my ears pounding with the rhythm of my own fear. Through the glass door, I saw them. 2 parents, faces etched with fury, sitting across from Principal Horns, and between them, my student Jenna, arms crossed, staring blankly ahead. The moment I walked in, all eyes turned to me. The temperature in that room didn't just drop. It plummeted, the air suddenly thick, heavy with accusation. And here's the thing, the brutal irony of it all. Jenna was my favorite student. Hands down, the brightest spot in my often thankless day. She always stayed after class, just to chat about books or ask about my weekend. She even started bringing me coffee every Friday because she noticed how tired I looked. She'd tell me I was the only teacher who actually gets me. And honestly, it felt good to hear that. Teaching can be incredibly draining, you know? Under my guidance, her grades soared from C's and D's to straight A's. A complete transformation. She even nominated me for Teacher of the Year, writing this incredible essay about how I'd changed her perspective on learning. I'd spent countless hours tutoring her for free, even coming in on Saturdays to help with her college essay, because her parents both worked and couldn't afford a tutor. Last month, her mom and dad sent me a handmade thank you card, saying I'd changed Jenna's life and they were forever grateful. Just last week, Jenna herself gave me another card with a drawing, declaring I was like family. So when Principal Horns looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, a cold, knowing gaze, and asked me to explain my inappropriate relationship with Jenna, I was so startled my body literally glitched, like a character in a video game. What? I stammered. There's no relationship. I'm her teacher. Jenna's mother stood up so fast her chair scraped violently across the polished floor. She slammed a thick folder onto Principal Horns' desk. Then explain these. The folder opened, revealing pages and pages of printed text messages. My phone number was at the top, clear as day, listed repeatedly, as if I was the one calling Jenna. Then I saw it, my number, in a conversation with Jenna's number. The messages? They were bad. Really, really bad. Overly familiar stuff about Jenna's personal problems, late-night conversations happening at 2 a.m. on school nights, inside jokes that sounded way too friendly for a teacher-student dynamic. I was disgusted, but I needed to know what I was being accused of. My hands trembled as I turned the pages. Messages about meeting up outside school, grabbing coffee on weekends, discussing Jenna's dating life in graphic detail. Then, one line made my blood run cold. Don't tell your parents we're talking like this. And the worst one? The one that made Jenna's dad actually stand up, his fists clenched, looking like he wanted to hit me. You're so mature for your age, not like my other students. I looked up at Principal Horns, my voice a ragged whisper. I never sent any of these. I've never texted Jenna outside of school, except for class reminders sent to my whole roster. Jenna's mom started to cry. Just admit what you did. My hands shaking, I pulled out my own phone to prove it, to show them my actual messages. But when I opened my texts, the conversation was there, in my phone. I started scrolling back, and there they were. Months of these messages I absolutely did not write. My mouth went dry. How was this even possible? I looked at Jenna, who was sitting there, eyes fixed on the floor, avoiding everyone's gaze. Jenna, I said, my voice cracking. Tears started running down her face. Her dad took a step towards me, his eyes burning with rage. I tried again, my voice desperate. Jenna, you know I never sent these. You know that. Tell them the truth right now. This is my life, Jenna. Why would you ruin it? Jenna just sat there weeping, saying nothing. I turned back to Principal Horns, forcing my voice to be steady despite the earthquake inside me. Check the phone records. The real phone records from the carrier. The metadata will prove I never sent any of these. Then, with every fiber of my being screaming for me to stay and fight, I walked out of that office. Jenna's father was mid-scream about ruining my life, but I just kept walking, knowing this was just the beginning. I walked straight to my car, my hands still shaking violently. I got in, closed the door, and just sat there, staring at the steering wheel. 20 minutes passed. I tried to make my breathing go back to normal, but it was impossible. The phone in my pocket felt wrong, like it was burning through my jeans, even though I knew that was irrational. I couldn't stop thinking about those messages, sitting there on my phone, proof of something I didn't do. I pulled it out, stared at it, then shoved it back in my pocket because looking at it made me want to throw up. Finally, I remembered the teacher's union number, saved years ago, never once needed. My hands were still trembling as I dialed. A calm, professional voice answered on the second ring, and I just started talking, words spilling out in a torrent about fake messages, Jenna's parents, and conversations on my phone that weren't mine. She listened without interruption, letting me ramble, probably making no sense at all. When I finally paused to breathe, she told me in that steady voice to go home right now and not touch anything on my phone until she called back. Her name was Veronica Goodwin, and she was going to help me. I drove home on autopilot, barely remembering the route. Veronica called back within an hour. She was my union rep now, she explained. First rule, 0 statements to anyone without her there. 0. She started asking detailed questions about my relationship with Jenna, and I answered everything. Every coffee, every after-school chat about books, every Saturday tutoring session, the time Jenna stayed late while I graded papers. I heard her taking notes, the scratch of her pen on paper, making everything feel terrifyingly real. She asked about gifts, and I mentioned the cards and the drawing. She asked about texts, and I explained the class reminders. She asked if anyone else had access to my phone, and I said no. But even as I said it, a chilling doubt began to creep in. That night, sleep was a cruel joke. At midnight, I was still scrolling through those fake messages, a sick feeling festering in my stomach with every swipe. Months of conversations, dozens of exchanges, happening at times I knew I was asleep, or in faculty meetings, or teaching class. The tone was wrong, completely unlike how I talked to students. Different words, different phrases, too casual, too friendly, using slang I didn't even know. It was like reading someone else's conversation, except my number was right there at the top. I started noticing the timestamps clustered around 2 and 3 in the morning on school nights. It made no sense. I'm a morning person. I'm always asleep by 11 p.m. Everyone at school knew that. I screenshot every single message, visible timestamps included, creating my own file of documentation. It felt dirty just looking at them, reading words I never wrote, about things I never said. But I kept going, saving every screenshot to a dedicated folder. Around 4 a.m., still wide awake, a memory surfaced that made me go completely cold. Jenna used to stay after class almost every day. I'd sometimes leave my phone on my desk while I wrote on the board or helped other students. She brought me coffee every Friday and would stand there chatting while I unlocked my phone to check my calendar or respond to parent emails. I had trusted her completely. She was my favorite student. I'd even handed her my unlocked phone once when she asked to call her mom because hers was dead. How long was she alone with it? 5 minutes? 10? Long enough to do something? My email pinged at 6 a.m. It was from Principal Horns. Subject, administrative leave. My heart pounded. The email was cold, formal. Effective immediately, I was on paid administrative leave. Surrender classroom keys and school laptop by end of day. Nothing personal. No acknowledgement of our 6 years together. No mention of our friendly chats at faculty meetings. Just procedures, requirements, formal language that made me feel like a criminal. I met Veronica in person for the first time at the district office later that morning. She was a woman in her 50s, short gray hair, sharp eyes behind glasses. She shook my hand firmly, and for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope, like someone was actually on my side. We sat in a sterile conference room, and she walked me through what came next. An HR investigation that could take weeks, possible police involvement if the parents pushed it, and a potential license board review that could end my career. She laid it all out in clear, stark terms, and I realized sitting there that this could get so much worse than I'd even imagined. Veronica gave me clear instructions, which I wrote down with shaking hands. Preserve my phone exactly as it was. Don't delete anything, don't add anything, just leave it alone. Document every interaction I could remember with Jenna, going back to the start of the school year. Create a timeline of my typical daily schedule, showing when I was usually asleep or in meetings. And the hardest one? Absolutely do not try to contact Jenna or her parents, no matter how desperately I wanted to explain or defend myself. She said anything I said to them could be used against me later. My brain felt like it was short-circuiting, but I wrote everything down, terrified I'd forget something vital. That night, I went through my phone more carefully, digging into settings and accounts I normally never checked. I found an old email from Apple buried in my inbox from months ago. The subject line was about my Apple ID being used to sign in. I opened it. It said my Apple ID was used to sign into messages on a Mac. The date on that email? Last October, right around the time Jenna started bringing me coffee every Friday. I stared at that date for a long time, my hands growing cold. I don't own a Mac, and I'd never signed into messages on any computer except my own laptop. I pulled up my calendar app, scrolling back to October, looking for that specific date. My hands were shaking a little as I swiped through the weeks, and then I found it. Friday, October 13th. Parent-teacher conferences had run late that week. I remember Jenna stayed after because her mom couldn't make the scheduled time. I'd been rushing around, making copies of progress reports for the next batch of parents, and Jenna had asked if she could use my phone to call her mom because hers was dead. I unlocked it and handed it to her without a second thought. She was my favorite student. I trusted her completely. I'd left her alone in my classroom with my unlocked phone for maybe 10 minutes while I ran to the copy room down the hall. That's all it would have taken. 10 minutes. Enough time to get into my settings, write down my Apple ID, even set up two-factor authentication on another device. My stomach twisted into a knot. I'd given her everything she needed, and I hadn't even realized it. It was almost 10 p.m., but this felt too important to wait. I called Veronica. She answered on the third ring, and I started talking fast, explaining about the Apple email, the date, and Jenna borrowing my phone. Veronica's voice got an edge of excitement I hadn't heard before. She cut me off mid-sentence. This could be exactly what we need. She told me she'd connect me with a digital forensics expert first thing tomorrow morning, someone who could examine my phone and document everything properly. She made me promise not to do anything else with my phone tonight. Just leave it alone and get some sleep if I could. I agreed, even though I knew sleep was impossible. After we hung up, I just sat there on my couch, staring at my phone like it was evidence in a crime scene. Which I guess it was. The next morning, I met Ahmed at a coffee shop downtown. He was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, dressed casually. But the second I showed him my phone, his whole expression changed. He became laser-focused, making me feel like I was finally in capable hands. He asked me to walk him through everything, taking notes on his laptop. I explained about the fake messages, the Apple email, my theory about Jenna. Ahmed nodded along, then explained in terms I could understand that if someone got my Apple ID login, they could set up messages on a Mac or iPad. Any text they sent would appear to come from my number, and they would sync to my phone automatically through iCloud. I wouldn't even know, unless I was specifically looking for another device on my account. Ahmed took my phone, connected it to his laptop, and began a complete forensic backup, explaining he needed to do it now before anyone could claim I deleted or changed anything. He talked while he worked, showing me how to navigate to my Apple ID settings to check connected devices. I watched over his shoulder as he scrolled. And there it was, a device listed as Mac that I'd never owned or used. My heart hammered. This was actual proof someone else was accessing my account. Ahmed screenshotted everything, the device name, serial number, last activity date. Then he showed me the timestamp on the unknown Mac. Last activity was 2:47 a.m. 3 days ago. I pulled up the folder of fake messages on my phone and scrolled to that exact time. There was a message to Jenna sent at 2:47 a.m. The timing matched perfectly. This proves someone else was accessing your messages, Ahmed explained. But we'll need more evidence to show it wasn't just you using a different device. He suggested checking with my phone carrier to get records of actual SMS texts versus iMessages. He explained that SMS texts go through the cellular network and leave different records than iMessage, which goes through Apple's servers. If we could show I sent 0 SMS texts to Jenna's number, it would strongly support the theory that someone was using my Apple ID to send iMessages from another device. I called my carrier right there at the coffee shop, requesting detailed records going back 6 months. The customer service person put me on hold, then came back saying it would take 3 business days to compile everything. 3 more days of waiting, my life still suspended. Ahmed packed up his laptop, promising a preliminary report documenting everything we found by tomorrow afternoon. I was driving home when my email pinged again. I glanced at it at a red light. It was from someone named Ronan Marshall in HR. Formal investigatory interview scheduled for tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. My stomach dropped. Veronica would attend with me, which I was grateful for, but the email listed the subjects of inquiry as boundary violations and inappropriate conduct. Seeing those words in official HR language made everything feel more real, more serious. This wasn't just an accusation anymore. This was a formal investigation with official procedures and potential consequences that could end my career. The light turned green and someone honked behind me. I was just sitting there staring at my phone. That evening, my phone started buzzing. Text messages from other teachers. At first, just one or two asking if I was okay, then more. Lisa from math, Noah from history. They wanted to know if the rumors were true. I didn't even know what rumors until Noah sent me a screenshot from the parent Facebook group. Someone had posted that a teacher at our school was on leave for an inappropriate relationship with a student. My name wasn't mentioned, but the post already had dozens of comments. Parents demanding to know who it was. Someone said they heard it was a male teacher in the English department. Another parent commented they were pulling their kid out of school until the district made a statement. The staff group chat was blowing up too, with teachers speculating. I opened Facebook on my laptop, even though I knew I shouldn't. There was a post from a parent I didn't even recognize. A teacher at our school has been grooming a student. And parents need to be aware. 3 people had tagged the school's official page. Parents were replying, asking why the person hadn't been arrested yet. Someone commented that they heard the teacher was still being paid, and that was unacceptable. Then, another parent. My daughter heard from a friend that it's my name. Now it was out there, publicly connected to words like grooming and inappropriate. I felt sick, but I couldn't stop scrolling. My phone rang. It was Veronica. In a firm voice, she told me I needed to immediately lock down all my social media accounts and stop reading anything online. The court of public opinion moves faster than actual investigations, she said, and right now I needed to focus on building my defense, not defending myself in Facebook comments. Anything I posted publicly could be used against me. She asked if I'd responded to any teacher texts, and I told her I'd only replied to say I couldn't talk about it. Exactly right, she said. Keep doing that. I'll see you tomorrow morning for the HR interview. After we hung up, I changed all my privacy settings on Faye. Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Everything went private or friends only. Then I closed all the apps and put my phone face down on the table. I couldn't trust myself not to keep checking. 3 days later, the carrier records arrived in my email, a PDF attachment. My hands shook so bad I almost dropped my phone downloading it. I scrolled through pages of data, every text message sent from my number for the past 6 months. There was a column that said SMS versus iMessage. Every single message to Jenna's number showed up as iMessage, not SMS. 0 regular text messages went from my phone to hers during any of the times those fake conversations supposedly happened. I forwarded the PDF to Veronica immediately. She called me within 10 minutes. This is exactly what we needed. The HR interview was the next morning. I barely slept. I showed up at the district office in a button-down shirt and tie, just as Veronica instructed, looking as professional as I could. She met me in the lobby, a folder full of documents in her hand. We walked into a conference room where Ronan was already sitting, laptop open, legal pad covered in notes. He shook my hand, his grip firm, his face giving nothing away. Veronica sat next to me, placing her folder on the table between us like a shield. Ronan started by reading me my rights in this investigation, explaining anything I said could be used in employment decisions and potentially legal proceedings. Then he opened his laptop and pulled up a timeline of events. He asked me to explain the Apple ID situation from the beginning. I walked him through finding the email about my account being used on an unknown Mac. Ronan typed notes, but his expression remained skeptical, like he'd heard excuses before and mine wasn't landing. He asked why I was tutoring Jenna on Saturdays without filing volunteer paperwork with the district. I admitted I didn't know I needed paperwork for informal tutoring, that I was just trying to help a student who couldn't afford a private tutor. Ronan wrote that down. He asked about the coffee she brought me every Friday and the handmade cards. My face felt hot. I knew how this looked now, even though it felt innocent at the time. I explained that accepting small gifts from students felt normal. Other teachers got holiday cookies or thank you notes. But Ronan pointed out that weekly coffee and personal cards saying I'm like family crossed a line. I tried to separate the boundary issues from the message accusations. I understood I'd gotten too comfortable with informal mentoring, but that didn't mean I sent inappropriate texts. Ronan just kept taking notes, saying the investigation would continue while they verified my technical claims about the Apple ID. The whole interview took 90 minutes. By the end, I felt like I'd been put through a grinder. Veronica walked me out to the parking lot. She told me I did fine. Admitting the boundary mistakes actually helped, she said, because it showed I was being honest instead of defensive about everything. 2 days later, Ahmed called with more findings that made my stomach flip. He'd traced the IP address of that unknown Mac, and it was coming from an internet provider that serviced Jenna's neighborhood. It wasn't definitive proof, IP addresses can be masked, but combined with everything else, it was building a strong case that someone in her area was accessing my account. Ahmed explained the technical details, half of which went over my head, but I wrote it all down. Veronica called that same afternoon. She said we needed to bring in an education law attorney to coordinate with both the union and potential police involvement. She recommended Benjamin Kim, who specialized in defending teachers against false accusations. I asked how much an attorney cost. Veronica said the union would cover part of it, but I should expect to pay around $5,000 out of pocket. My heart sank. I didn't have $5,000 just sitting around. I met Benjamin the next week in his office downtown, a gleaming glass building that made me feel out of place in my teacher clothes. He was younger than I expected, maybe in his 40s, wearing an expensive-looking suit, sitting behind a huge desk covered in case files. He shook my hand and immediately started firing rapid-fire questions: my relationship with Jenna, the timeline of events, the evidence we had. I showed him everything: the carrier records, Ahmed's forensic report, the Apple ID email, my documentation of where I was when messages were sent. Benjamin spread it all out on his desk, studying each document carefully, making notes. He explained that even if we proved the messages were fake, I'd still face consequences for the boundary violations. But the difference between inappropriate conduct and poor judgment was the difference between losing my teaching license forever and keeping my career with some disciplinary action. He started building a defense strategy right there, talking about how we'd present the technical evidence and frame the boundary issues as mistakes in judgment rather than intentional misconduct. 2 days later, the school resource officer, Leah, contacted me requesting a voluntary statement about my relationship with Jenna. I forwarded her email to Benjamin, and he called me immediately, telling me to decline the request. Anything I said to Leah could be used in both the employment case and a potential criminal case, he explained, and we needed more evidence before I made any official statements to law enforcement. I felt trapped. Declining to talk made me look guilty, but Benjamin said it was standard legal strategy. A week later, the district forwarded me a demand letter from Jenna's parents' attorney. 3 pages of legal language, threatening a lawsuit for negligent supervision and failure to protect their daughter from a predatory teacher. The letter included direct quotes from the fake messages, the ones about not telling parents and her being mature for her age. It demanded I be immediately terminated and criminally prosecuted, giving the district 30 days to respond. Reading those words, I felt like I was going to throw up. This was my life they were destroying with lies. The next blow came in an email from the district's HR department. I was being removed from my role as academic decathlon club advisor, effective immediately. That was a $3,000 annual stipend. It doesn't sound like much, but it was money I counted on for rent and bills. The email stated they couldn't have me in any student-facing role, even unofficially, while under investigation. My finances were already tight from the attorney fees, and now I was losing income on top of it. Late one night, unable to sleep, I went through every single memory of every interaction with Jenna, trying to figure out how this happened. I remembered that day back in October when she asked to borrow my phone. I'd unlocked it, handed it to her without a second thought, then got pulled into a conversation with another student about a late assignment. Jenna had my phone for maybe 5 minutes while I was distracted. She could have easily gone into my settings, grabbed my Apple ID information, even written down my 2-factor authentication code if one popped up. The timing matched exactly with that Apple email about my account being used on a Mac. I called Veronica first thing the next morning, telling her about this memory. She said to write down every detail I could remember about that day while it was fresh. I sent Veronica the detailed write-up that same night. She responded within an hour. This is exactly the kind of specific memory we need. 2 days later, the district IT department sent over access logs for my school laptop, showing every time it was turned on and connected to the network over the past 6 months. I scrolled through the spreadsheet. Every login was during school hours, between 7 a.m. and 4 p.m., always from the school's IP address, never from home or any off-site location. There wasn't a single login at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. when those fake messages were being sent. It wasn't proof by itself, since the messages went through my phone and Apple account, not the laptop. But it backed up my claim that I wasn't awake and active on my devices during those late-night hours. I forwarded the logs to Benjamin and Ahmed immediately. 3 days after that, I was lying on my couch in the middle of the afternoon, because what else was there to do on paid leave? When my phone buzzed with an Instagram notification. A message request from an account with no profile picture, just random letters and numbers. The message said, "Jenna told me things got out of hand and she doesn't know how to stop it now." My heart started racing. I wanted to respond immediately, to demand who this was, what Jenna had said. But I remembered Veronica's instructions. No contact without running it past Benjamin first. I screenshotted the message and sent it to Benjamin, my hands shaking. He called me back in less than 5 minutes asking if I responded. No, I said, I didn't touch it. He sounded relieved. Leave the account unread. Don't block it. Don't respond. Just let T sit there. He was going to try and figure out who owned the account. Benjamin called back the next morning. The Instagram account belonged to Marissa Powell, one of Jenna's close friends from school. He'd tracked it down through some legal process I didn't fully understand. Benjamin asked if I knew Marissa. I told him I'd had her in class before. She was quiet, never caused problems, but I didn't know her well. Benjamin said he was going to contact Marissa's parents through proper legal channels and see if she was willing to provide a statement about what Jenna told her. I asked if that was safe, if it could backfire and make us look like we were going after Jenna's friends. Benjamin said, as long as we go through parents and follow all the right procedures, it should be okay. A week went by with no word, and I started to think Marissa's parents had shut it down. But then Benjamin emailed. Marissa agreed to give a statement with her parents present. He attached a copy. I sat at my kitchen table, my hands clammy, and read it. Marissa said Jenna was really upset back in September when I hadn't written her college recommendation letter as quickly as she wanted. Marissa said Jenna's parents were fighting a lot at home, talking about separation, and Jenna felt like I was the only stable adult who actually cared about her. The statement described how Jenna would talk about our tutoring sessions constantly, how she felt like I understood her better than her own parents, how she started to depend on our conversations to get through her day. It wasn't a confession that Jenna faked the messages, but it gave chilling context for why she might have done something this extreme. Benjamin called after I'd had time to read it. Marissa had provided more details in a follow-up. Marissa said Jenna felt abandoned when I had to cancel 2 Saturday tutoring sessions in a row because of family emergencies on my end. That was back in early October, right around the time of that Apple ID email. Marissa's statement said that's when Jenna started talking about making him see how much I meant to her, about showing him that I couldn't just be dropped like everyone else in her life had. Marissa hadn't understood what Jenna meant at the time, thinking she was just being dramatic. Reading this made me feel sick. I remembered those cancellations. I remembered feeling guilty about letting Jenna down, but I had legitimate family stuff to handle. I never imagined she'd take it this hard, or that it would lead to this. Midway subscribe line. It was like every piece of the puzzle, every forgotten detail was suddenly clicking into place, painting a picture far more disturbing than I could have imagined. If you're still with me, if you're hooked on this story of betrayal and my fight to clear my name, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss how this shocking truth finally comes to light. Main story continued. Benjamin warned me the next day that we needed to be really careful with how we used Marissa's statement. It could look like we were attacking or intimidating a minor, trying to paint Jenna as mentally unstable or manipulative. That could backfire and make people sympathize with Jenna even more. We'd share Marissa's information with HR and investigators only as context, not to publicly discredit Jenna or make her look bad. The goal was to show investigators that Jenna had a possible motive based on her emotional state and the timeline of events, not to destroy a teenager's reputation. I agreed. Even though I was furious at what Jenna did to me, she was still a kid, and I didn't want to hurt her more than this situation already had. Ronan sent an email a few days later. The investigation was being paused pending the police department's review. Criminal matters took precedence over employment issues, he explained. HR had to wait for law enforcement to finish before they could proceed with their own conclusions. I was stuck in limbo on paid leave, which sounded better than it was. I was going completely stir-crazy at home. I couldn't go to the school, couldn't see my students, couldn't do the job I'd spent 6 years building a career around. Meanwhile, my reputation was getting destroyed online, with parents posting about the investigation and speculating about what I did. I checked the school's Facebook page against my better judgment. Parents demanding answers, calling for my immediate termination, saying their kids weren't safe. My name still wasn't officially public, but enough people knew. It was only a matter of time. Then the anonymous tips started coming into the school. Leah contacted Benjamin saying they'd received multiple calls and emails claiming there were other victims, that I had a pattern of inappropriate behavior with female students going back years. Benjamin requested details. Leah said they were investigating each one, but so far none had produced any actual complainants or evidence. The tips were vague, saying things like other students have complained or there are rumors. But when investigators followed up, there was nobody willing to make an actual statement. It felt like people were piling on, now that I was vulnerable, making up stories or exaggerating normal teacher-student interactions to make themselves part of the drama. Every new tip sent Benjamin and Veronica scrambling to defend against claims that didn't even have names attached. Ahmed finally completed his full forensic report after 3 weeks of analysis. 40 pages long, filled with technical details I barely understood. But the conclusion was clear. Messages were sent from a Mac computer using my Apple ID during specific times when my phone's location data showed I was either at the school in meetings with other teachers present or at home asleep based on my phone's movement patterns and screen activity. The report included detailed explanations of how iMessage syncing works, how someone with brief access to an unlocked phone could have obtained Apple ID credentials and two-factor codes, and how they could have set up a Mac to send and receive messages that would appear to come from my number. Ahmed included screenshots of the device list showing the unknown Mac, the IP address data pointing to Jenna's neighborhood, and the timeline of when that Mac was first added to my account in October. Veronica took Ahmed's report and formally submitted it to HR, requesting it be included in my personnel file. She was building a paper trail, showing that we'd been cooperative and transparent throughout the investigation, that we'd provided extensive technical evidence supporting my claims, and that we'd followed every proper procedure. This documentation would matter, she said, if this went to a formal hearing or if the union needed to defend me against termination. The paper trail showed we took this seriously from day one and didn't just deny everything without backing it up. My colleagues started reaching out privately over the next week. Apparently, Ronan had been interviewing teachers who had Jenna in their classes or who observed my interactions with her. 3 different teachers messaged me, saying they told Ronan they noticed Jenna was overly familiar with me, that she brought me gifts constantly, stayed after class every single day, and talked about me to other students in ways that seemed inappropriate. One teacher, Mrs. Anderson from the English department, told me she actually pulled Jenna aside once and warned her about maintaining appropriate boundaries with teachers. Mrs. Anderson said she noticed Jenna was treating me more like a friend or an older boyfriend than a teacher, and it made her uncomfortable. She told Jenna that bringing coffee and gifts every week wasn't normal student behavior, and that she needed to back off a little. According to Mrs. Anderson, Jenna got defensive and said I was the only teacher who really understood her, and that other teachers were just jealous of their relationship. Reading these messages from colleagues made me feel validated but also incredibly guilty, because I should have noticed these warning signs myself and shut it down earlier. That weekend, I spread every calendar, planner, and attendance record I owned across my kitchen table and started building a timeline. Month by month, I wrote down every single class period, faculty meeting, parent conference, and tutoring session from September through March. For each day when fake messages were sent, I documented exactly where I was. I pulled up old emails and texts to other teachers to prove it. Like a message sent to Jenna at 2:14 a.m. on a Tuesday in November. My calendar showed I had an 8 a.m. department meeting the next morning that I led, with notes I'd prepared the night before at 9 p.m. I even found a photo I'd posted on social media at 10:30 p.m. that night, showing my cat asleep on my lap while I graded papers. I was building proof that I was home, asleep, living my normal, boring life, while someone else was using my Apple ID to send those messages. The timeline took me 3 full days to complete. By Sunday night, I had a 40-page document with TAT, timestamps, locations, and witnesses for almost every hour of the past 6 months. I sent it to Benjamin and Veronica. Benjamin called back within an hour. This is exactly what we need. Benjamin filed preservation letters with Jenna's parents' attorney on Monday morning. The letters demanded that they preserve all of Jenna's devices, her cloud storage accounts, any computers in their home, and all internet router logs. He was creating a legal record that if they deleted anything now, it would look like destroying evidence. The letter explained we had technical proof that messages were sent from a Mac computer in their neighborhood, and we were prepared to subpoena device records to prove which specific computer was used. Benjamin told me this was a strategic move. Even if we never actually got access to Jenna's devices, the preservation letter put pressure on them and showed we were serious about fighting this. He was building the foundation for potentially proving exactly how she did it. And the letter made clear we weren't just going to accept these accusations without a real fight. 2 days later, Marissa reached out again, through her parents who contacted Benjamin directly. She sent a screenshot she'd saved from a group chat back in January, weeks before the accusations started. In the screenshot, Jenna was talking to friends about me, and the messages said things like, "I'm going to make him see me differently, and he needs to understand how much I need him." There was another message where Jenna said, "He's the only one who gets me, and I can't just be another student to him." The screenshot wasn't proof that Jenna faked the messages, but it showed her mindset was getting unhealthy way before any of this blew up. It showed she was thinking about me in ways that went beyond a normal student-teacher relationship, and she was actively planning to change how I saw her. Benjamin saved the screenshot and added it to our evidence file. I felt this weird mix of validation and guilt because this proved Jenna was fixated on me, but I'd still missed all the warning signs. Benjamin and Veronica had a long phone call that night about whether to use Marissa's screenshot. Veronica was worried it would look like we were trying to paint a 16-year-old girl as manipulative or mentally unstable, which could backfire and make people sympathize with Jenna even more. Benjamin argued the screenshot provided important context about Jenna's state of mind and her intentions toward me. They went back and forth for over an hour. Finally, they decided to share it only with HR and the investigators as background context. We wouldn't leak it publicly. We wouldn't show it to the media if they came asking. And we wouldn't use it to attack Jenna's character. It was just context to help investigators understand the full picture of what was happening in the months before the accusations. Benjamin sent it to Ronan with a cover letter explaining we were providing it confidentially as part of the investigation, not as a weapon against a minor. 3 days later, Ronan emailed me directly, with Benjamin and Veronica copied. He was scheduling what he called a Loudermill hearing for next week. It was a pre-disciplinary meeting where I'd have a chance to respond to all the evidence before any final employment decision was made. Benjamin called me right after the email came through. This was actually a good sign, he explained. It meant the district was following proper procedures instead of just firing me on the spot. The Loudermill hearing was my chance to present my side, show all the technical evidence, and explain what really happened. Benjamin said we'd prepare carefully, bringing everything we had. Ahmed's forensic report, the carrier records, my timeline, and all the documentation showing someone else accessed my Apple ID. He sounded almost optimistic for the first time in weeks, and I tried to let myself feel a little bit of hope. But then Veronica called with bad news. Word was getting back to her through her contacts in the district that some board members were pushing hard for my immediate termination, regardless of what the evidence showed. They were arguing that the optics of keeping me employed were too risky for the district, that parents were scared, and that even if I didn't actually send the messages, the whole situation made me a liability. Other board members wanted to wait for the police investigation results and see what the Loudermill hearing revealed. Veronica said there was a real split on the board, and she was hearing that at least 3 members had already made up their minds that I needed to go. She told me to prepare for the possibility that even with all our evidence, the board might decide my career wasn't worth the public relations nightmare. I hung up feeling like no matter how much proof we gathered, politics and fear might win anyway. The next morning, Benjamin called with better news. Leah contacted him to say the DA had reviewed the case and was declining to file criminal charges at this time. The official reason, evidentiary concerns and conflicting technical findings. It wasn't an exoneration. It wasn't the DA saying I was innocent, but it meant I wasn't facing criminal prosecution. Benjamin explained this was huge because it took the worst possible outcome off the table. I wasn't going to be arrested. I wasn't going to face trial. And I wouldn't have a criminal record, even if the employment case went badly. The DA looked at Ahmed's forensic report showing the unknown Mac, looked at the carrier records showing no SMS texts, and decided there was too much reasonable doubt about who actually sent those messages. I felt this massive weight lift off my chest. At least I knew I wasn't going to jail, even if I might still lose my teaching license. That night, I sat in my apartment and recorded a personal statement on my phone. I explained the whole situation from my perspective, talked about the Apple ID hijacking, described how I tried to help Jenna, and it got twisted into something terrible. I thought about posting it on Reddit or YouTube, just putting my side out there so people could hear the truth directly from me. But then I called Benjamin and Veronica, and they both immediately told me to hold off. Benjamin said anything I posted publicly could still be used against me in the employment case. The district's attorney would comb through every word looking for admissions or inconsistencies. Veronica added that going public might make me feel better temporarily, but it could make the board members even more defensive and determined to fire me. I saved the recording in a private folder and tried to accept that sometimes defending yourself means staying silent and trusting the process, even when every part of you wants to scream the truth. The Loudermill hearing was scheduled for the following Monday at 10 a.m. in a conference room at the district office. I arrived with Veronica and Benjamin at 9:45, feeling like I was about to throw up. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold my folder of documents. We walked into the conference room and the panel was already there, waiting. Ronan sat at the head of the table with his stack of investigation files. Principal Horn sat to his right, looking uncomfortable, like he wished he was anywhere else. 2 district administrators I'd never met sat across from them, both stern and official in business suits. The room had cold fluorescent lighting and a big window overlooking the parking lot. There was a water pitcher and glasses on the table, but my mouth was so dry I don't think I could swallow anything. Benjamin and Veronica sat on either side of me. Veronica touched my arm briefly as if to steady me. Ronan started the hearing by reading a formal statement about the purpose and procedures, and I tried to focus on his words instead of the panic rising in my chest. I presented my timeline first, walking the panel through the 40-page document, showing where I was during every fake message timestamp. My voice shook at the start, but I pushed through it, pointing out specific examples. The 2 a.m. message sent while I was provably asleep before an early morning meeting. I showed them the carrier records, proving I sent 0 SMS text to Jenna's number, explaining that every message went through iMessage. which meant they all could have been sent from that unknown Mac. I pulled out the Apple ID email from October and explained how Jenna borrowed my phone right around that date, how she could have grabbed my credentials and two-factor code in those few minutes. I admitted straight out that I made mistakes with informal tutoring, that I should have filed proper paperwork and shouldn't have accepted gifts like coffee and cards. But I looked each panel member in the eye and told them I never sent those messages, that someone else accessed my account and created this nightmare. I acknowledged that while I made errors in judgment about boundaries, I never crossed the line into inappropriate conduct. Benjamin passed around copies of Ahmed's forensic report. The panel members started flipping their key off the pages while I finished. Ahmed stood up and walked to the front of the table. One of the administrators I didn't know asked him to explain his findings in simple terms. Ahmed pulled out a printed diagram showing how Apple's messaging system works. He started explaining that when you sign into iMessage on a new device, it syncs all your past conversations and lets you send messages that appear to come from your phone number. He pointed to the metadata from the unknown Mac and showed the panel exactly when it was used to send messages to Jenna. Then he pulled up my phone's location data from the same timestamps, showing I was either at the school in documented meetings or at home asleep. The panel members leaned forward, looking at the side-by-side comparison, and I could see them starting to understand. One administrator asked how someone could have gotten my Apple ID credentials. Ahmed explained that with brief access to an unlocked phone, someone could grab the username and intercept the two-factor code, especially if they knew what they were doing. Ronan asked if there was any way I could have sent the messages from the Mac myself. Ahmed said technically yes, but then he'd need to explain why my phone's location data and my documented schedule proved I wasn't the one using that device during those specific times. The questioning went on for maybe 20 minutes. Ahmed stayed calm and confident through all of it, never getting defensive or uncertain. When he sat back down, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we'd given them enough doubt. Benjamin stood up next. He had a whole presentation ready on his laptop. He pulled up a slide showing 2 columns. On the left, he listed the boundary violations I was admitting to, like undocumented Saturday tutoring sessions and accepting gifts. On the right, he listed the allegations of an inappropriate relationship and grooming behavior. He walked the panel through each column carefully, explaining that the left column represented poor judgment and policy violations that deserved corrective action, while the right column represented serious misconduct that the technical evidence strongly suggested was fabricated by someone else. He proposed a corrective action plan, mandatory professional boundaries training, regular check-ins with an assigned mentor teacher, and documented procedures for any future student interactions outside normal class time. He emphasized that I was taking full responsibility for my mistakes with informal mentoring, but that terminating me for misconduct I didn't commit would be unjust given the forensic evidence. One of the administrators asked why I didn't follow proper procedures in the first place. Benjamin acknowledged that I made errors in judgment trying to help a struggling student, but that those errors don't equal the predatory behavior I was being accused of. The presentation took maybe 15 minutes. When Benjamin sat down, I felt like I couldn't breathe from the tension. Ronan stood up and thanked everyone for their time. He said the panel needed to deliberate privately and would provide a written determination within 5 business days. 5 days. It felt like forever, my entire career hanging in the balance. We all stood up and started gathering our materials. I looked at Principal Horns, but he wouldn't make eye contact. Veronica touched my elbow and guided me toward the door. Benjamin followed behind us. We walked out into the hallway, and I felt like my legs might give out. Veronica said I did everything I could, and now we just had to wait. But waiting felt impossible when every minute was going to be torture. Benjamin said the forensic evidence was strong, and my admission of the boundary violations without trying to minimize them probably helped. But he couldn't predict which way the panel would go. We walked out to the parking lot together. I got in my car and just sat there for a long time, staring at the steering wheel, before I could even start the engine. The next 3 days were the worst of my life. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus on anything except imagining what the panel was discussing. I kept checking my email every 5 minutes, even though I knew the determination wouldn't come this fast. On the 3rd day, my phone rang. It was Benjamin. My heart started racing before I even answered. He said Leah had just called him with news. The DA had officially closed the criminal investigation without filing charges. The technical evidence created enough reasonable doubt about who actually sent the messages, and without being able to prove beyond reasonable doubt that I was the one on that Mac, they couldn't move forward with charges. Benjamin said this was huge for the employment case because now the district couldn't point to pending criminal charges as justification for termination. I felt this wave of relief so strong I actually started crying on the phone. Benjamin gave me a minute to pull myself together. He said, "We're not out of the woods yet, because the district can still fire you for the boundary violations alone, but the criminal case being closed definitely weakens their position." I thanked him about 6 times, hung up, and just sat on my couch feeling like maybe I could breathe again. 2 days later, the email arrived at 4:47 p.m. on a Friday. Subject: Loudermill hearing determination. I stared at it for a full minute before I could make myself open it. The email was formal and cold. 3 paragraphs of official district language. The first paragraph said, "After careful review of all evidence and testimony, the panel has determined that while the evidence regarding the alleged inappropriate text messages is inconclusive, I did violate district policies regarding undocumented student contact and acceptance of inappropriate gifts." The second paragraph said, "I am being issued a formal written reprimand that will remain in my personnel file, and I am required to complete professional boundaries training within 60 days. The third paragraph said, "I will be reassigned to a different school for the next term to provide a fresh start for all parties involved." I read it 3 times, trying to process what it meant. I wasn't fired. I still had my job. But I was being punished, moved, and my reputation was still destroyed. I forwarded the email to Veronica and Benjamin. Veronica called me within 10 minutes. This is actually a pretty good outcome, given how bad things looked a month ago. She said the reprimand sucked, but it wasn't termination. And the reassignment might actually be better than trying to go back to my old school where everyone knew what happened. The next morning, I got a letter via certified mail from an attorney representing Jenna's parents. 2 pages of legal language, but the main point was clear. They were withdrawing their immediate threat of a lawsuit, but the letter specifically stated they were reserving all civil options and made it very clear they still believed their daughter's version of events. There was no apology, no acknowledgement that maybe the messages were fake, no recognition that the DA closed the case. Just this cold legal letter, stepping back from litigation while making sure I knew they still thought I was guilty. I read it sitting at my kitchen table and felt this mix of relief and anger. Relief that I wasn't facing a lawsuit right now. Anger that they couldn't even consider the possibility that their daughter lied. I put the letter in the folder with all my other documentation and tried to move forward. I made the mistake of checking Facebook that afternoon. The posts were still there. Parent groups still talking about that teacher and the investigation, even though the case was closed. My name was out there forever now, connected to words like inappropriate, boundary violations, and investigation. I Googled myself. The first results were local news articles about a teacher being investigated at my school. Even though they didn't name me, anyone who knew me would know it was about me. I realized this was never going away. 10 years from now, someone could Google my name and find traces of this nightmare. I closed my laptop and tried not to think about how every future job interview, every parent-teacher conference, every interaction with colleagues would be colored by this. Principal Horns emailed me 2 weeks later, saying I was allowed to return to campus to pack up my classroom, but I needed to do it after hours, when students weren't around. I drove to the school at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday, using my key to get in through the side entrance. The hallways were empty and dark, lit only by emergency lights. My footsteps echoed on the tile floors. I walked to my classroom, unlocked the door, and seeing all my stuff still arranged like I'd be back tomorrow made my chest tight. I started taking down posters and packing books into boxes, and every item felt like a piece of my old life that was gone now. The coffee mug Jenna gave me was still on my desk. I stared at it for a long time before throwing it in the trash. It took me 3 hours to pack everything. When I was rawing the last box to my car, I looked back at the building and realized I'd probably never walk these halls again, even if I wanted to come back, even if they'd let me. Too much had been broken. Benjamin called the following week. The state teaching license board sent him a letter saying they'd be reviewing my case since there was a formal investigation. He said given the outcome and the technical evidence showing the messages were likely fabricated, he expected they'd close it with at most a cautionary note in my file. But it was another few months of waiting and uncertainty, another process hanging over my head. I asked him how long this was going to follow me. He was quiet for a minute before saying that formal investigations leave a paper trail that never fully disappears, but that the fact I wasn't terminated or criminally charged would matter to future employers. It wasn't the reassurance I wanted, but it was honest, and I appreciated that he wasn't sugarcoating things. My landlord called me 3 weeks after the district determination, asking if we could talk. I met him in the building's lobby. He was uncomfortable, not making eye contact. He said some other tenants had expressed concerns after hearing about the accusations. And while he wasn't evicting me, he'd really prefer if I found somewhere else to live when my lease was up in 2 months. My face got hot. I wanted to argue, to explain that I was cleared, but I could see in his expression that it wouldn't matter. The damage was done. I started apartment hunting that weekend and found a place across town that was smaller and cost $200 more per month. The moving costs and higher rent ate into my savings, and I was exhausted from packing up another piece of my life. I loaded boxes into a rental truck on a Saturday morning and drove across town to my new place, trying not to think about how I was basically running away from my own neighborhood because people thought I was a predator. Veronica called the week after I moved. She found a therapist who worked with teachers who'd been through false accusations. I didn't want to go, but she was pretty firm about it being part of my recovery process. So I scheduled an appointment. The therapist's office was in this medical building downtown. I sat in the waiting room, feeling like everyone could see right through me. The first session was awkward as hell. The therapist asked me to explain what happened, and I gave her the short version. She just nodded and took notes without much reaction. I left feeling like I'd wasted an hour and $150 of my savings. The second session wasn't much better, but by the third session, something shifted. I was actually talking about why I let things get so blurry with Jenna in the first place. The therapist asked me what I was getting from all those coffee chats and Saturday tutoring sessions. And it hit me. I was getting validation. Real validation that I was making a difference, that I was the favorite teacher, that I was actually good at this job. She pointed out that needing that validation made me ignore warning signs about the relationship becoming too personal. I was sitting there on her couch and it finally clicked. I let a student bring me coffee every Friday because it felt good to be appreciated. And I didn't see how that was crossing a line until it was way too late. 2 weeks after that session, Benjamin emailed me. He'd reached out to Jenna's parents through their attorney, offering a mediated conversation where I could explain what happened and they could ask questions, in a controlled setting with both attorneys present. Their response came back 3 days later, ice cold. Their attorney wrote that they appreciated the offer, but they had no interest in hearing my explanation. The letter made it super clear they still viewed me as having hurt their daughter, regardless of what the technical evidence showed. Benjamin forwarded me the email and added a note. This is pretty common in these cases. Even when you're cleared, some people will never believe you're innocent. I read the email twice, then closed my laptop. There was nothing I could do to change their minds. Veronica called me a week later with news about Marissa. She said Marissa transferred to a different school and sent a note through the union office. The note said she felt guilty about the whole situation, but her parents didn't want her involved anymore. Veronica asked if I wanted to respond or reach out. I told her no. Benjamin had already warned me to maintain complete separation from anything involving Jenna or her friends. I wasn't about to mess that up now. I thanked Veronica for letting me know. And that was the end of it. Marissa was gone from my life, just like everything else from that school. The state license board letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in a thin envelope that made my hands shake when I pulled it from the mailbox. I opened it right there in the parking lot of my apartment building. The letter said they were closing their review with a notation in my file about boundary awareness concerns, but no formal discipline. My teaching license remained active and unrestricted, which meant I could keep teaching. I could keep my career. I could actually move forward. I read the letter 3 times to make sure I was understanding it correctly. Then I went back inside and put it in a folder with all the other documentation. It wasn't an exoneration, but it was enough to let me keep going. My first day at the new school assignment happened 3 weeks later. I was so nervous I almost threw up in the parking lot. I kept thinking the staff knew about the investigation, that parents had Googled me, that I was going to walk in and face whispers and suspicious looks all over again. But the principal greeted me in the main office, professional and welcoming. She showed me to my new classroom and introduced me to the teachers next door. They were polite, if a bit reserved, and I couldn't tell if they knew anything or if this was just normal new teacher treatment. One teacher brought me a spare stapler, another told me where the good coffee machine was hidden. I spent the day setting up my classroom, trying not to compare it to the room I had to pack up in the dark 3 months ago. I implemented strict new policies for myself starting day 1. All student communication happened through official school email only. No exceptions. Tutoring sessions are documented in writing and happen only in the library, with other people present. I keep my classroom door open during any one-on-one conversations, even if it's just a quick question after class. I never accept gifts from students, not even a stick of gum or a piece of candy. If a student tries to give me something, I thank them and suggest they give it to the school office for the teacher appreciation basket instead. These boundaries felt excessive and paranoid at first, like I was building walls between myself and my students, like I was being cold and distant when I should be warm and approachable. But gradually, I realized these structures actually made me feel safer and more confident. I knew I was protected if anyone ever tried to manipulate the relationship again, and that peace of mind was worth being less accessible. 3 months into the new assignment, I got another letter from the license board. This one officially closed my case with no further action required. I kept the letter in a folder with all the other documentation from the investigation. Carrier records showing I never sent those texts. Forensic reports proving someone else accessed my Apple ID. Hearing transcripts from the Loudermill, the district's determination letter. Everything is in that folder, just in case I ever need to defend myself again. Just in case someone tries to bring this up years from now. Just in case the nightmare starts over. I wrote out the whole story in a private document one Saturday afternoon when I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every detail, from the lunch interruption to the final license board letter. I typed for 3 hours straight, and when I was done, it was 15 pages long. Part of me wants to post it anonymously online, to warn other teachers, to tell them to be careful, to explain how easily this can happen to anyone. But Benjamin advised against it when I mentioned the idea. He says even anonymous posts could be traced back and used against me if Jenna's parents ever do file a civil suit. So the document stays private, saved on my laptop in a password-protected folder that only I can access. 6 months after everything started, I was chaperoning a district-wide academic competition at the convention center downtown when I spotted her across the main hall. Jenna. She was standing with her new school's team, wearing their colors, holding a binder, laughing at something another student just said. She didn't see me. I was behind a registration table, helping check teams in. I froze for a second, just watching her, looking so normal and happy. Part of me felt this hot anger bubbling up because she almost destroyed my entire life. Cost me thousands in legal fees, Aid me move apartments, put me through 6 months of pure hell. But another part of me just felt sad for whatever was going on in her head that made her think framing me was somehow a solution to whatever she was dealing with. I didn't approach her or try to make contact. I just turned back to my clipboard and kept checking in teams. Eventually, her group moved to their competition room, and I didn't see her again that day. I'm still teaching. My license is intact. I survived this whole nightmare. But I'm different now, in ways that are both good and bad. I'm way more careful and professional with every single student interaction. I document everything. I never meet with students alone, and I keep my classroom door open during any one-on-one conversations. The boundaries feel safer, but they also feel like walls. And I've lost some of the warmth and openness that made me good at connecting with students in the first place. Kids don't stay after class to chat anymore, because I'm polite but distant. I don't get nominated for Teacher of the Year or receive handmade cards. The career I worked 6 years to build is still here. I still have my license and my job, but it's altered in ways I'm still learning to accept. I am a teacher who survived being framed. I wonder, what would you have done in my place? Or have you ever found yourself in a situation where you were falsely accused and had to fight to prove your truth? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.